conditions for progressive development in Eurasia. On the 23rd of May, Sergei Lavrov, according to the established tradition, will participate in the annual assembly of the Council on Foreign and Defensive Policy. This time, the topic of the session is going to be Russia in an irreversibly changed world. As always, there will be an open part of the discussion and the close discussion with the representatives of the politological community. On the 25th of May, in the name of the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, there will be a solemn session with the African Corps dedicated to the annual Day of Africa, celebrated all over the world. This is a celebration that symbolizes the victory of the continent in their fight for independence and their striving for peace, unity, and unity. This day, in the 1963, in the capital of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, 32 independent African states signed the Charter of the Organization of African Unity. This was the start of the way of Africa for political and economic integration. The good tradition of this association, continued by African Union, that represents the collective interests of the continent on the international arena, contributes to turning it into independent and influential center of world politics. Our country provided full and unconditional support to the national liberation movements in Africa, contributed to strengthening sovereignty of young states, their social, economic development, and today Russian-African relations, our cooperation demonstrates progressive dynamics. We always prioritize expanding multi-phased cooperation with this continent. Let's speak about the relevant agenda. Ukraine. The Kiev neo-Nazi regime, with support of NATO countries, continues attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure of our country, including cruise missiles, long-range rocket, artillery. At the same time, Kiev is openly glad by the hunt started by the AFU militants against women, children and elderly, the attacks on residential houses and social facilities. Zelensky brags cynically before his foreign masters about these terrorist attacks, blatantly saying that there will be new long-range sanctions against Russia, and is escalating the conflict. But he forgets to mention, but I do not think that, I think he should mention it, because first of all, they're targeting civilians. Usually, Ukraine was saying they were trying to be part of the West because they they're striving for democracy, for liberty, for human rights. Well, over the last week, the shellings and strikes of Ukro-Nazis, UAVs, affected 234 Russian citizens, 203 killed, 203 injured, 18 children included, 31 people killed, including 2 kids. Specific facts over the regions. The Belgrade region, from the 15th to the 20th of May, AFU strikes affected 5 people, 19 injured, including a 14-year-old boy. Bryansk region, the 15th, 20th of May, the attacks affected 6 civilians. DPR, 5 people killed, a teenager of 2010, 17 injured, including a kid of 2013. The 14th of May, the Zaporizhia region, a school was attacked in the city of Vasilievka, but there was no detonation. On the 14th, 18th of May, the shellings and attacks of Ukrainian UAVs affected the territory of Zaporizhia and PP. 2 employees were injured, and their evacuation was not possible because of the multiple strikes by the AFU. A transport shop was affected as several buses. From the 16th to the 17th of May, in the cities of Dnepropetrovsk and Energodar, the strikes of Ukrainian UAVs affected a playground and the kindergarten. Where are all those European parliamentaries that were always concerned with the human rights, but they don't know anything about this. They don't know what their money is used for. The regimes of those countries who form part of the European Parliament. Kursk region, 20th of May, 3 people killed, 9 people injured. Elpia, the 18th of May, as a result of the strike of Ukrainian UAV against a regular minibus in Lysychansk, a 17-year-old girl was killed, 2 people injured. Moscow and Moscow region, the 17th of May, a mass attack of UAVs against residential houses. 3 people killed, including an Indian citizen, 4 people injured. In Moscow, 12 builders from the Moscow refinery injured. Ryazan region, 15th of May, an attack an apartment building of Ukrainian UAVs. 4 people killed, including a child. 28 injured, including 4 kids. Kherson region, from the 15th to the 20th of May, everyday attacks of the AFU killed 3 people, 5 injured, including the head of the Skadovsky municipal district, Alexander Dudka. All of them will be held responsible because this is terrorism. This is not just a criminal act. Russian law enforcement organs continue gathering evidence to responsibilize the heads of Ukraine, the AFU, and foreign militants for the committed crimes. 12 years of sentence were given to Roman Chebanenko, the head of the detention facility in the city of Kropivnitsky, who was not implementing the Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war of 1949 and was physically abusing the Russian prisoners of war, and he is internationally wanted. The 17 and 13 years of sentence in absentia were given to the Sweden and British militants Nils Daniel Dahlgren and Simon William Dalby. They are also internationally wanted. Life sentences in absentia were given for the crimes in 2023-2025 in the Kursk and Belgorod region to the Ukrainian militants Alexander Borsh, Oleg Patrick, and Dmitry Primakov. 14-year sentence was given to Andrei Tsit. Terrorist crimes committed an organized group since 2022 to 2023 in Ryazan region against the facilities of the Minister of Defense of Russia and railway. 30 years were given in absentia to the citizen of Ukraine, Artem Klassen. 23 years of prison for the crimes committed in 2019-2022. The person giving orders about artillery strikes against civilian sector of DPR, Ukrainian terrorist Alexander Lutsenko, and all of them are internationally wanted. And you can see what Zelensky is doing amongst all of this. Yesterday, on the 20th of May, it was 7 years since the inauguration of Zelensky. In 2019, he was present at the elections and won under the motto of the restoration of peace, justice, fight against corruption. Just remember, during the election campaign at the beginning of his presidential mandate, Zelensky made a lot of encouraging statements, giving hope for people, and people gave him his votes. At the time, people were very tired of fratricidal war unleashed by the victors of Maidan. They were tired of infringement of the rights of the Russian-speaking people, persecution of the canonical Orthodox Church, rewriting of history, turning Ukraine into anti-Russia. They believed in Zelensky and his whole team that tried to persuade them that they are going to restore peace, restore justice, and they will restore law and order. They return Ukraine to normality. But I'll remind what Zelensky said when he was entering his duties. I'm not afraid of making complicated decisions, Zelensky said. I'm ready to lose my popularity, my rating, if it is necessary, without any hesitation, said Zelensky. I'm ready to lose my position so that there was peace. But today, all those words clearly have turned into something absolutely opposing, that is a mockery of everything that he was promising. He's clinging to his position, to everything that could preserve his power, but not for peace, but for war. Today, it's absolutely clear that all the election promisings of Zelensky was a cynical lie, and a young, promising, so-called president of peace turned into a bloody usurper. The corruption in Ukraine has become a byword. It penetrates the whole system of power in Ukraine, including the close circle of Zelensky and he himself. At the same time, ordinary Ukrainians die in butchers' assaults. For what? For golden toilets of Timur Mindich or elite jewelry of Yelena Zelenskaya. So that all this bunch of people in Ukraine could go abroad and have fun there, so that they would transfer millions or even billions of finances that were stolen for the future of the...
Видимо, проживать точно не на Украине, как они же сами об этом теперь уже не стесняясь говорят, как бы насмехаясь над теми гражданами Украины, которым выпала иная участь. В интервью ведущим западным СМИ во время избирательной кампании Зеленский тогда говорил, опять же, прямая цитата, статья 10 Конституции Украины, украинский язык, государственный язык, страна
perhaps even illegally, and immediately received temporary protection. And that's the reason why the European Union has made so many statements about human rights. But now information about the pantheon of eminent Ukrainians being created in Ukraine. We have already mentioned this intention to create this so-called pantheon. It was not a joke on the 1st of April, at our 1st of April briefing, no. The Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has identified 98 such burials in 21 countries. This includes the Ukrainian People's Republic, the West Ukrainian People's Republic, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. So all that scum, Nazi scum, will be collected all over the world in order to become a part of glory, materialized glory on the territory of current Ukraine. According to Ukrainian media, recently exhumation in Clairvaux, Luxembourg, the process has already started. So people, initially from Ukraine, writers, painters, poets, public figures, their monuments are destroyed. The memory plugs are destroyed. Just have a look. Odessa, the monument to those who have created this city, it has been destroyed. Some neo-Nazi medals are made from the material of this monument. But that Nazi scum, memory plugs are installed and their remains are collected all over the world. And Ukrainians will be made to pray for their ashes. It was about Colonel Yevgeny Konovalets, who is buried in Rotterdam in one of the cemeteries. Zelensky couldn't resist expressing his enthusiasm on this occasion. He said that a moral duty of Kiev is to return home the ashes of Ukrainian heroes who, it's a direct quote, defended the idea of independence, fought for Ukraine's statehood and were buried outside its borders. But they also killed people on national grounds. Zelensky obviously forgot to mention that. I'm sure that soon it will come to reburial of Stepan Bandera in Ukraine. But not a piece of advice, but a demand by Kiev regime. Do not forget Khanka. Just prepare a special place in this pantheon to him. It will be a pearl, obviously, of this hell alley of anti-glory. Against the background of a new round of corruption scandals surrounding Zelensky in a circle and forced mobilization, Bankova is clearly attempting to calm the flames by redirecting public attention to the sacred figures of Ukrainian neo-Nazism, thereby trying to raise morale in the army and patriotism among the population, encouraging them to unite in the name of an uncompromising, as they have said, fight against Russia, and to honorably rebury those figures in the aforementioned pantheon. I would like to once again emphasize that this place is unlikely to be revered by the residents of Ukraine. Their ancestors fell victim to the terror of aggressive Ukrainian nationalists, who repeatedly betrayed their competitors and loyally served their oppressors. The above facts confirm the urgency of the task of denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine and the elimination of threats from its territory. All these goals will certainly be achieved, as the Russian government has stated on many occasions. So now Tulsi Gabbard has made statements about examination, investigation into biological laboratories. How many do you think are located on the territory of Ukraine? I would remind you 40. Over 40 biolaboratories are situated in the Ukrainian territory. We have repeatedly drawn attention to the international community's attention to the dangerous and unregulated U.S. military biological activities outside of its territory, including in Ukraine. Pentagon military biological programs on Ukrainian territory in violation of the Biological and Toxin Weapons Convention. We have mentioned this issue during our briefings and briefings by the Russian Ministry of Defense, thanks to Igor Kirillov. An investigation into circumstances connected with biological laboratories by American specialists and the Parliamentary Commission has studied all the available sources. Also received during the special military operation and the affiliated structure of Ukrainian biological laboratories. Russia has initiated a consultative meeting on Article 5 of the BTWC. It's about a meeting in Geneva on the 5th, 9th of September 2022, as well as discussions on this topic at the UN Security Council. And the 9th BTWC Review Conference in Geneva in November 28, December 16, 2022. Allegedly, it's about disinformation. No, there is no disinformation. The Americans, they will be checking that. That's what this civilized international community, it has denied that before. It's about a comprehensive resolution of the problem, and the Western side has consistently called for that in recent years. We will continue our work within relevant multilateral forums, primarily within the BTWC, including in close proximity to the Russian territory. And now about the financing of all those atrocities in Ukraine by the Westerners. We have received many questions on the reinvestment of the so-called frozen Russian assets. 6.6 billion euros have been transferred by Brussels to the Kiev regime since February 2024, and in July Brussels intends to replenish the Ukrainian budget by another 1.4 billion euros. I would underline that any transactions concerning our assets without Russia's consent are illegal. What the European Commission is doing is blatant robbery, and any attempts to whitewash it with some pseudo-legal invented formulas and mottos are unfounded. Profits from transactions with Russian reserves are solely due to the freezing of funds de facto seized from our country without trial, without any legal basis. All those involved in this sordid affair will inevitably be held accountable for their deeds. Frozen Russian assets proceeds are not being used for social needs, but primarily to support the Kiev junta. It's sponsoring terrorist crimes, including the targeted detonation of explosive devices in public places, the murder of civilians, and the bombing of critical civilian infrastructure not only in Russia but also abroad. The Kiev regime not only fails to investigate terrorist crimes and to hold those responsible accountable, but deliberately creating a safe haven for terrorists on its territory. I would remind you, it's the bombing of the Crimean Bridge. 5 civilians were killed. Car bombing in the Moscow region where Daria Dugina was killed. Detonation of an explosive device at the street food bar in St. Petersburg where journalist Vladimir Tatarsky, Maxim Fomin, was killed. The so-called Russian Volunteer Corps terrorist organization attack in the Bryansk and Belgorod regions in the 2nd of March 2023 and May 22, 2023 respectively. The car bombing where right and public figure Yevgeny Prilepin was attacked and injured, and his driver Alexander Shubin killed. Terrorist attack on the Crocus City Hall in Krasnogorsk, which killed 145 civilians and injured over 550 civilians. Neo-Nazi battalion's crimes in the Kursk region, including the murder of 22 civilians in Ruskaya Perechная. It has become a revelation for the international community. Such an atrocity is possible in the 21st century. Multiple terrorist attacks against the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Energodar, Zaporozhye Oblast, including artillery, missile shootings, unmanned aerial vehicles attack, posing a risk of nuclear catastrophe, attack against Metagas LNG tanker near the coast of Malta in the Mediterranean Sea. All the mentioned and many other, it's just not a full, not a comprehensive, but a symbolic list. And other terrorist crimes. Russian investigative bodies have opened and investigated criminal cases. Evidence has been obtained on the implication of citizens. Verdicts have been issued on some cases. I would like to draw your attention that the Federal Republic of Germany informed the UN Security Council of the US arrest of the Ukrainian citizen suspected of involvement in the bombing of the Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2. Another suspect was not extradited but by Poland and has fled to Ukraine. Ukraine has been presented with claims based on the International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism and the International Convention for the Suppression of Terrorist Bombings. So any use of frozen Russian assets for terrorism should be regarded as terrorist financing. And it's a direct violation of the International Convention for the Suppression of the Financing of Terrorism and the International Convention for the Suppression of Terrorist Bombings. Apart from terrorism financing and other international crimes, it's also about a violation of sovereign immunity of state property, which stems from the principle of the sovereign equality of states, Article 2, Paragraph 1 of the UN Charter. And any sponsoring acts of genocide, terrorism, other international crimes committed by Ukrainian citizens. We will make the relevant claims about them, and we will demand compensation for the damage caused to our country in accordance with international law. On the 15th of May, the Moscow Arbitration Court supported the claim by the Bank of Russia for damages amounting to 18.17 trillion rubles for the unlawful blocking of domestic assets by the Belgian depository Euroclear. We are satisfied with this decision. Now let us move on and discuss the situation in Moldova. It is looking more and more like absolute destabilization, with long-standing goals set by the pro-Romanian leaders of this country. But why pro-Romanian? Romanian because Sandu has the citizenship and passport of Romania. Sandu called Russia an aggressor and the most serious threat to the continent's security in the decades to come. Allegedly, our country launches drones on sleeping civilians, targets hospitals, schools, and power plants. So I would like to ask, is she not insane? Our ambassador, Oleg Ozerov, was summoned to the Moldovan Foreign Ministry regarding the illegal flight of an unmanned aerial vehicle through the Moldovan airspace. But why I question the sanity of Maria Sandu? Which drone exactly flew over the territory of Moldova? There is no word Russian UAV there and there is no proof at all. Just they detected something flying, and Russia is to blame, of course. They have used this drone hysteria in order to justify actions against our country aimed at reformatting the republic according to so-called Euro standards. It's not Euro standards, it's hellish mobilization, militarization of Western Europe in connection with the propaganda they are carrying out by voluntarily making people to believe in some aggression by Russia. And that story about alleged European standards is not about Euro standards and not adopting their own standards to some European Union standards. It's about mobilization of resources of Moldova, not for the interests of the Moldovan people, but for those who rule in Brussels. They have taken the decision of the closing of cultural centers, forcing us to close the Russian house in Chisinau. It is presented as a response to the alleged violation of Moldovan airspace by drones. And this includes discrimination against Russian passport holders entering the Republic. Those people are subjected to long-hour screening procedures and inspections and interrogations. They are denied consular assistance, and in this regard we once again strongly recommend to carefully consider the risks and assess whether it is advisable to visit Moldova. It's not safe.
The deputies of the parties, the Action and the Solidarity, adopted in the first reading the amendments to the Code of the Structure and Functioning of the Parliament. That includes the fact that the legislative acts are not going to be translated into the Russian language. On the 9th of May, the authorities of Moldova refused the patriotic forces of the country to start the March of Victory and the Immortal Regiment on the central square of the Moldovan capital. These were not pro-Russian acts. These were acts organized by the veterans of Moldova in honor of those ancestors who protected Moldova from fascism and Nazism during the Second World War. Well, they were refused. There was organized the Day of Europe. According to the media, there were not many people. Many of them came for the record. Even the order sent by the Ministry of Education of Moldavia to educational institutions with a requirement for the history teachers together with their pupils to come. But it didn't help because the teachers of history know the history of Moldova and they want their pupils to become zombies because of this propaganda trash. There is active condoning of the rewriting of history. On the 9th of May, in the village of Kushmirka on the region of Sholda-Nesht, there was a monument inaugurated, which is called the Well of Heroes Reintegrators. Orwell. And I think all his ancestors, and Platonov, and Saltykov-Shchedrin, they have nothing. They cannot nothing say about this name. I think Bulgakov could compete, but it's not a fact. The monument is called the Well of Heroes Reintegrators, in the memory of the soldiers of the army of Antonescu that died in the battles for the liberation of Bessarabia from the Soviet occupation in July 1941. The cynicism is that under the guise of restoration of this monument, not only the name was changed, but the nature of the monument. It was inaugurated in 1937. It was a well of heroes dedicated to the people died in the First World War. Is it normal? Just when we are speaking about distorting the historical memory, this is not a metaphor, this is a fact. This is the distortion of history. On the 19th of May, the President of Moldavia, Maria Zakharova, received in Strasbourg European Order, the Order for Merits. Usually it is given for the merits, for national merits, but Moldavia is not the motherland for Maria Sandu. She has the citizenship of Romania. And what are the merits? Surrendering the sovereignty of the country, destroying its economy, fighting against any type of dissidence, rewriting of history. These are merits, but this has nothing to do with Moldova. Under the pretext of fighting for their re-entering the EU, well, EU is based on other values. And all of this under the pretext of fighting the non-existent Russian threat. It is curious that, according to the media, while Maia Sandu was speaking in the Euro Parliament, the ex-deputy of the Parliament of Romania called her a dictator that is covering up for drug mafia. Well, apparently the lawlessness committed by the Moldavian authorities causes repulsion even in the EU. Moldovan people find forces to fight against the destructive policy. And the day of victory in the Great Patriotic War was celebrated widely in Moldova. There were celebration, patriotic acts, concert in Chisinau. The Immortal Regiment united more than 30,000 people, and in Transnistria more than 105,000 of grateful descendants of heroes anti-fascists. And the future of Moldova is in their hands, but not in hands of Sandu, or those who receive medals for their merits not before their own motherland. I would like to speak about other topics that are also very relevant and cause a lot of questions among the media. I would like to speak about Cuba. Cuba is subject to gross economic pressure by the U.S. The new restrictions introduced in May this year against the companies of third countries that work on the Liberty Island is another round of the pressure policy by Washington. The main target is the economic suffocation of the country. The attempts of the White House administration to tighten the sanction noose around Cuba, together with the many years of trade, economic, financial, humanitarian, and the fuel and energy blockade, is a direct reflection of the intolerance of Washington to any type of dissidence, cynical embodiment of reanimated Monroe Doctrine. Where are the human rights? Where is respect for people? Where the liberty of freedom of expression? Where is all of this? Where are any elementary notions? I'm not speaking about morale, but I'm speaking about that you cannot do just what you want. There is law, there is order that restricts this lawlessness. I'm sure that the heroic Cuban people that demonstrated loyalty to the ideals of freedom, independence, social justice showed wonderful resistance and courage in the face of challenges, will preserve its unity, and the firmness of spirit will protect its national interests. We stand in full solidarity with Cuba, and we condemn any attempts of interference into internal affairs of the sovereign states, intimidation, or use of illegal unilateral restrictive measures, blackmail, and threats. We will support actively our brotherly Cuban people in this complicated period, and Habana was informed about the modalities of all of this. Japan. On the 12th of May, the Foreign Minister of Japan, Motegi, said that the relations with Russia are important, but they're not going to change anti-Russian foreign policy course. So the dismantlement of the positive baggage accumulated over the time of bilateral ties was started by initiative of Japan. Without any foundations, they linked the further cooperation with our country with the situation around Ukraine, not under the pressure of their own people, but under the pressure of Washington. To return to normal interstate relations, Tokyo should take practical steps that confirm their abandonment of the current hostile policy without any link to what is happening thousands of kilometers away from Japan on the territory of Ukraine. And before the 81st anniversary of victory, we received information the laboratories crimes committed by Tokyo. This is confirmed. The results of the Khabarovsk process. The General Prosecutor's Office in March, April this year officially informed about the sentence to 55 Japanese citizens, and the full text will be published on our website. All those people whose names are going to be given there participated in the subversive spy activities on the Soviet Union. Those in those lists were killing prisoners of war, were using violence against them. They were engaging in banditism in the 1945. After the review of these constitutional decisions, it was confirmed that these people cannot be rehabilitated, and their blame is fully confirmed. We will continue our work on the crimes of the militarist Japan. In May this year, in Blagoveshchensk, there was an exchange of archived documents between Russia and China. The solemn ceremony related to the actions of the Regiment 731 was conducted in the context of the 16th scientific conference between Russia and China about the prospects of further development. The documents were presented by the director of the research center that is working of the Regiment 731. There is information about this Regiment 731, the list of the people, and these materials are going to be used in research, and they will be open for historians, researchers. The head of the historical memory before the president of Russia, Elena Malasheva, gave their Chinese colleagues the information about genocide against the genocide of Soviet citizens. The documents of the Khabarovsk process reflect what happened what happened at the time and the results of this process. With the support of regional government, there was a special exhibition opened dedicated to the victory in the Far East. It unites different documents from the Russian and foreign museums that tells about the plans of military Japan to colonize Russian lands, as well as about the military crimes of military's Japan, about bacteriological weapons created by Japan, and or inhumane crimes against the Soviet people. And we're going to publish the information on our website. The previous briefings we spoke about, answered the questions about the use of information technology, cyber fraud, because that is disseminating very actively. We were speaking about Southeast Asia. There is the problem of the so-called fraudulent centers, and people are forced to work in these centers, people from different countries, including Russia. The activity of such centers was registered in Myanmar, Cambodia, Thailand. Thanks to the coordinated rapid work of the Embassy of Russia in Myanmar and the Ministry of the Interior of Russia, together with local authorities, on the 5th of May, the employees of Russian Embassy in Thailand received 2 citizens of Russia that were liberated from the fraudulent call centers on the territory of Myanmar for their further transfer to the Russian Federation. I would like to use this opportunity to call
относиться к информации, которая, как правило, публикуется в сети интернет, в мессенджерах, относительно набора сотрудников на высокооплачиваемые должности в сферах туризма, как это преподносится, бизнес.